Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And I'm proud to be joined by my colleagues here today. You see everyone arrayed out. And it's great to lead our caucus with these women and the occasional male interloper. Now, for 2 decades, over 2 decades, Republicans across the country have worked to dismantle Roe. They've worked to take away the rights of women who simply want to make their own choices and not be told by some doctor, some senator, some court justice how to treat their bodies. Republican politicians across the country are passing laws telling the women of America, your body, our choice. So much for the party of limited government. And now with the Republican court on the verge of tearing down 5 decades of precedent, Republicans suddenly don't want to talk about their complicity in this effort. You ask them about, do they support repealing Roe v. Wade? They change the subject. What does that say? It says they know they're on the wrong side of history and on the wrong side of the American people. And their 30-year effort, they now wish to go underground because they're actually afraid in certain ways that it might succeed. All week, we've seen Republicans try to duck, dodge, and dip from their responsibility for bringing Roe to the brink of total repeal. This is about to change. Next week, the U.S. Senate is going to vote on legislation to codify a woman's right to seek an abortion into federal law. I intend to file cloture on this vital legislation Monday, which would set up a vote for Wednesday. Republicans will have 2 choices. They can own the destruction of women's rights, or they can reverse course and work to prevent the damage. Count me as skeptical that they'll do the latter. Republicans have been on the wrong side of history and the wrong side of America. A poll just released today from Data for Progress showed voters want Roe to stay the law of the land by a 2-to-1 margin. Democrats, independents, and 35% of Republicans believe we should keep Roe in place. Next week's vote will be one of the most important we take, not only this session, but in this century. This is not an abstract exercise. It's as real, it's as urgent as it gets. Like my friend Patty Murray said, this is a 5-alarm fire. And Republicans will not be able to hide from the horror they've unleashed on America. In recent years, Republican legislators have been racing to pass extreme anti-choice legislation that would send women's rights back into the Stone Age. The Mississippi law, for example, has zero exceptions for rape or incest, a position that was the extreme of the extreme not too long ago, but now it seems to be the mainstream of the Republican Party and, unfortunately, the Supreme Court, which has become extreme itself. In Arizona, the governor signed a law that can imprison anyone who provides, supplies, or administers an abortion by up to 5 years, should Roe be overturned. No exception for rape, no exception for incest. The infamous law in Texas, meanwhile, bans abortions as nearly as 6 weeks. Many women don't realize they're pregnant until after 6 weeks. And again, no exception for rape, no exception for incest. In Louisiana, Republicans are pushing a new bill that would throw women and their health care providers in prison for life. It doesn't stop. And they're going to keep at it until we, the American people, and particularly the women of America, stop them. The nationwide ban Republicans want is the most extreme of extreme. This is what Senator McConnell and Senate Republicans have fought for their entire careers. But they are out of step with the mainstream. Their body language, their answers to questions show they know they are. Americans do not want to go back in time when there were dangerous and back-alley abortions. We're going to have this vote this week, and believe me, America, all of America, will be watching. Republicans will not be able to hide from the American people and cannot hide from their role in bringing Roe to an end. Senator Murray.
Well, there's no getting around it. This has been a very heartbreaking week. The Supreme Court's plan to end a right that generations of women have known is devastating. So I just want every woman across the country to know you are not alone in this fight. We are right here with you. And although I'm heartbroken, I'm also furious. I'm furious at the conservatives on the Supreme Court for being so cruel. I'm furious at Republican lawmakers in states across this country who are passing extreme abortion laws and creating a health care crisis in their states and in their neighboring states. And I'm furious at the fact that my Republican colleagues here in the Senate have filled our courts with extreme anti-abortion judges and taken every opportunity to attack the right to abortion and even the birth control and family planning services that patients across this country rely on. They are finally getting what they've been working around the clock to do for decades. And despite all that, it's been crickets from Republicans here this week. They have spent the last few days trying to distract everyone from the consequences of their unrelenting attack on the right to abortion. Well, we're here to say we are not going to let them. We may very soon live in a country without Roe, a country where women are forced to remain pregnant and give birth when they don't want to, no matter their personal circumstance. And we all know who is going to be hurt the most when this happens. It is not the rich women who can catch a plane and get the time off and find the money to get an abortion somewhere else. It is the women who are already facing huge challenges and barriers getting health care. We're talking about long-standing inequities in our healthcare system, things like racism and sexism and ableism. The women who will bear the brunt of the Republicans' cruelty are women with the tightest budgets, Black women, Indigenous women, women of color, women with disabilities, women in rural areas, immigrant women, and the LGBT community, and of course many others. This is cruel and unacceptable. Democrats are fighting back. So next week, in light of the devastating news coming out of the Supreme Court, we are going to make every senator show where they stand by voting on the Women's Health Protection Act. And I want to thank Senator Blumenthal for his work on beginning this and building the support on this. And I want everyone to know I'm not going to stop fighting or speaking up. And when November comes, Americans everywhere need to make their voices heard by sending more pro-choice voices to the Senate and to the House so we can get this done. Abortion rights are on the line, and so are women's lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Next, we have Senator Cantwell. We're doing it in order certain people have certain.
Thank you. Thank you. This week was a political earthquake when it came to the Supreme Court. Now, the American people deserve to hear and understand where every member of the United States Senate is on this issue. Women are not second-class citizens, and we are not criminals. We want to understand whether our colleagues agree with that statement or not. We know that as employers, I was an employer in the private sector, and guess what? Anybody who you wanted to attract to come work for you wanted to know what your health plan was, and their spouse wanted to know what your health plan was. They wanted to know whether you covered IVF. Are now we going to say that those are the kinds of things that aren't going to get covered in the future? What are we going to do as employers here in the United States Senate? What are we going to do about federal agencies? Do you think people are going to want to go and work in NASA in Florida or Texas if that state precludes a woman's right to choose? Are we going to have extra money in the budget so people can travel to a state so they can get their health care rights? Or are we going to have a brain drain because people aren't going to want to work for federal agencies located in a state that doesn't protect a woman's right to choose? This is ludicrous. Americans need to call their member of the United States Senate starting now. You need to call and ask people to stand up for a woman's right to her reproductive health care choices and to protect privacy in the Constitution of America. These privacy rights denied in this case could be denied in other cases. It is time for every member of the United States Senate to be accounted on this issue. Call now. Ask your member of the United States Senate to stand up and be counted for on our privacy rights.
Thank you, Maria. Senator Baldwin.
If the court overturns Roe versus Wade, millions upon millions of women will lose a constitutionally protected freedom to make their own personal decisions about their health care, their family, and their body. In my home state of Wisconsin, if Roe is overturned, a 19th century state law would go back into effect that bans Wisconsin doctors from performing abortions. Wisconsin lawmakers passed that law in 1849. Yes, more than 170 years ago, and just 1 year after Wisconsin became a state. If the state's abortion law went back into effect, women's health care would be criminalized and doctors could be charged with felonies for performing abortions and face up to 6 years in prison and $10,000 in fines. That is precisely the problem with overturning Roe and returning this issue to the states. Politicians can interfere with women's access to health care, and I don't want to take women in Wisconsin back to 1849. I don't want to take away the rights of victims of rape and incest. I want women to have the same freedom that they have had for the last 50 years since Roe became the law of the land. This is in such stark contrast from my Senate Republican colleagues who want to strip away the constitutional rights and freedoms of women in Wisconsin and nationwide. If the Supreme Court is going to legislate from the bench and turn back the clock by 50 years on Roe, then the Senate needs to pass our Women's Health Protection Act. The House passed the Women's Health Protection Act last year, and now the Senate has an urgent need to pass our legislation to protect the provider-patient relationship, to protect the healthcare professionals that provide care, and protect the freedom and constitutional right of a woman to access this care. I am so glad, Majority Leader Schumer, that you will be bringing this legislation to the floor for a vote, and that every senator will have a choice. They'll have a choice on whether they want to undermine and infringe on constitutional rights guaranteed under Roe versus Wade, or do they support protecting the freedom of millions and millions of Americans to make their own personal decisions about their health care, their body, and their families. The American people overwhelmingly support this legislation and believe that women and their doctors should have control over their medical decisions, and these decisions for each family to make, and the government should not interfere. So next week, the American people will see where their senator stands. Should American women have the same constitutionally protected rights and freedoms that they've had for 50 years? Or will American women have fewer rights than their mothers and grandmothers?
Thank you, Tammy. Senator Stabenow.
Thank you. No, all week you've been asking, and we've been asking Senator McConnell and Republicans, do you support what the Supreme Court appears to be getting ready to do? Do you support taking away a woman's ultimate, most personal, intimate right to privacy and our ability to make our own reproductive decisions and have access to safe and legal abortion? Do you support that? Do you support overturning 50 years of settled law? And instead what Senator McConnell has done is said, look over there. Look over there. Let's talk about leaks. Let's talk about leaks. Let's not talk about the women of this country and what's on the line. Well, next week, they're not going to get away with just saying, let's look over there. They're going to have to vote. They're going to have to vote, and we'll know right where they are. And so the ultimate question becomes, who decides our most intimate healthcare decisions? Who decides what we will do in terms of reproduction and the health care related to that. When there's a 12-year-old that's been raped, who decides that? Mitch McConnell? Right-wingers in the United States Supreme Court? Republicans in Congress and in state legislatures? Who decides what happens to that child? Their family, based on their religious beliefs? Do the doctor, all those that care and know the child? Or a bunch of politicians? Same thing at the other end when you have someone like my cousin who desperately wanted a baby and tried for years, and after multiple miscarriages finally got pregnant and was carrying this baby to term, was so excited, and something horrible happened near the end of the pregnancy, and her life was in serious jeopardy. Mitch McConnell doesn't know my cousin. The politicians here that are determining this, they don't care. They don't think she should have made her own decision, as horrible as it was to have to make. That's what this is about. Who decides in the most difficult, challenging times for a woman, the most personal of decisions? We stand with the women of this country. We support you, we respect you, and we know it is your decision to make.
Thank you, Debbie. Very touching sharing. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. I want you to picture the faces, and as you go around this weekend, think about the women that you see. Think about the waitress in the heart of Texas who finds out she's pregnant and can't afford to take a bus 250 miles. Think about the college student who has no access in the middle of Mississippi to any kind of student clinic, anything. Think about the young woman in foster care that's afraid to tell anyone what's happened because she didn't know if there's going to be a bounty hunter situation and she's going to be turned in. The victim of incest, who under the Mississippi law wouldn't be able to get an abortion. This is about women's freedom. This is about women's equal rights and being treated as they should, as an equal citizen under the law. Our Republican colleagues have stacked the court. And as I was listening to Tammy talk about Wisconsin, I thought we always said they'd take us back to the 50s. They're taking us back to the 1850s. That's what we're talking about here. But they may have the majority on the U.S. Supreme Court, but we have the people on our side. And in election time, they always say, don't get mad, vote. Well, we say, get mad and vote, because that's what we're going to be doing on behalf of the women and the men who stand with them, the people of America, next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Gillibrand.
This is an issue that is defining for this country today. And if the American people don't stand up for equality for every American at this moment in time, we will be undermining a right to privacy in more than this context. Women deserve freedom and bodily autonomy. We deserve to be able to make decisions about when we are having children, under what circumstances we are having children, how many children we are having, and at what time we are having children. I would like to speak to America's men for 1 minute. Imagine you do not have authority over your own body for 10 months. Imagine if that decision-making would not be taken away, even if you would die in childbirth, even if you couldn't decide who you were having children with, even if you couldn't decide when you were having that child. I don't think a man in America could actually imagine not having control of his body, his bodily functions, what happens to him, and what life would be like for 10 months. It is an outrage that we have 5 justices on the Supreme Court who lied in their confirmation hearings in order to be confirmed. It is an outraged that in America today, that our judicial system is so corrupted and so politicized and no longer representative of the will of the people. 5 justices said they respect precedents. 5 said that Roe v. Wade was established precedents. 5 said they would never undermine established precedent. It is unconscionable what this decision will do to the American people. I do not think that 50% of America should be told that they have to put their bodies at risk of life or death without their consent. It is barbaric, it is inhumane, it is unacceptable, and I hope every human being in this country understands that when you take away a woman's right to make her decisions about her health and well-being, she is no longer a full citizen. She no longer has freedom. She no longer has bodily autonomy. She no longer has basic civil rights or civil liberties. That is what this decision would do in America today. Make no mistake, equal rights, constitutional rights to privacy, the ability to make your own decisions about your own life and your own death are on the ballot in November. I hope there is no one who's confused about this. It may happen to your daughter, it may happen to your wife, it may happen to your mother, it may happen to your transgender friend. It may happen to anyone, and it is not acceptable. This is a life or death moment, and we need to fight like it is.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Senator Hirono.
You know, I am just gobsmacked. I hardly know where to begin. But fundamentally, Republicans don't give a rip about women. They are more angry, incensed, and whatever words, outrage by the leak than they are by the fact that women in this country are going to wake up one morning and realize they no longer control their own bodies. I share the sentiments of my colleagues standing here and all the people out there who are outraged by what the Supreme Court, well, the radical right-wing justices on the Supreme Court are about to do. So I ask the question, is there anything we can do to men that even comes close to forcing a woman to have a baby? I tweeted that out, and there are all kinds of really interesting reactions. Go to that tweet, and you'll find out what's happening out there. But the damage that is being done to women in this country shows Republicans don't give a rip about us.
Thank you to my women colleagues. I'm so proud to stand with you, especially with Patty Murray and Tammy Baldwin, who have fought from the beginning when we first introduced the Women's Health Protection Act. To the men of America, you don't get to sit this one out. Women's health care rights are human rights. Women's reproductive care affects everyone. Women are furious, and you should be furious too. And most especially to people of color, the LGBT community, low-income women, people who will be most vulnerable. Please know we are going to fight for you. You are not alone. And this fight is going to be now. It will be in weeks to come when these measures are voted on the Senate floor. Again, every senator will be held accountable. Reproductive rights will be on the ballot this November, and I am counting on the men of America to do the right thing because it is about all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just make one more point. Some are saying that this legislation would tell hospitals, certain religious hospitals, that they have to perform abortions. That is simply not true. This bill simply gives providers the statutory right to provide abortion care without medically unnecessary restrictions. That's plain and simple. So this rumor is false. Yes. Just for the, it's because we're not cutting back, we're not compromising. This is about a woman's right to choose fully. We are not looking to compromise something as vital as this. People should show where they stand. This has been American law for 50 years. And this idea that, oh, do a little of this, a little of that, forget it. Yes.
What would you tell voters who defend the rights of the unborn, who say that the unborn have rights as well?
They're entitled to their views, and everyone else is entitled to our views. The majority of America believes that women have the right to choose. That's the view of close to 70% of America. We're not telling them what to do. We don't want them to tell us what to do. Yes.
So the vote next week, we know it'll be filibusters. So after that, what will Democratic senators actually do
Look,
to protect abortion access?
you know, the first step is to have a vote in the Senate. I think you've heard every one of my colleagues echo how important it is now that we live in a different world where it's no longer an exercise in abstraction to show how people feel, how each senator votes. Which side are you on? You can't duck it anymore, which they've done for a very long time. And once we have that vote, we'll look at the best way to get things done. Yes?
Are there additional legislative proposals that you would do, whittled down proposals, or are you...
We're starting off here, but you will hear plenty from us. This is not just one vote and then this issue goes away. You will hear a lot from us through the next months, all the way through November. Yes?
Leader Schumer, are you at all concerned about the leak that happened about what it means for the institution itself, that a draft opinion for the first time?
Well, the Supreme Court's looking into that, but to compare a leak to taking away the rights of over 100 million women and saying the leak is more important, give me a break. Forget it. Yes. You can chime in if you want.
Yeah, I know, if you're really concerned about that, why don't we look at the testimony of the justices who said they wouldn't do this?
What did you say about it?
Okay.
It's a lie, and we've never had fraudulent testimony in the Supreme Court before. This is unprecedented to have justices commit fraud during hearings. So if you want to talk about process, I would focus on that process.
Leader Schumer, would you look into changing the filibuster rules or doing some sort of carve-out like you did for voting rights with this?
As I said, we're having the vote next week. We're going to see where everyone stands. It's the first time there's a vote like this in a very, very long time when the actual rights are at stake, when it's not an abstract exercise. Once we have that vote, we will figure out the best way to go from there. Last one.
Mayor Schumer, do you expect all 50 Senate Democrats to vote for this?
You'll have to ask each of them. Thank you, everybody.